Welcome back. And our next topic is topic 5, the role of civil societies in sustaining the Earth's ecological health. The speakers for this topic are Mr. Muhammad Faisal Abdul Aziz, ABIM President, and Assistant Professor Venerable Karma Tashi Choedron from Malaysia with moderator Mr. Wilson Ang. I now have the pleasure of introducing the moderator for this session, Mr. Wilson Ang. Mr. Wilson Ang is the pioneer and past president of the Singapore Buddhist Fellowship. He is currently a board member of the Southeast Asia Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Wilson's Dharma study began when he was a boy, and he completed the Young Men's Buddhist Association examination at a tender age of 16. He enjoys raising awareness of Buddhism through music, conferences, and public talks. He has organized and chaired several international and local Buddhist conferences, including Buddhist musical plays, notably Sadhu for the Music, which was performed at the Singapore Esplanade. He finds it a blessing to share the Dharma at temples and various public forums and leads fundraising projects to help the less privileged. Let us welcome Mr. Wilson Ang to continue the session. Over to you, Wilson.
Thank you, Brother Chong. Good morning, distinguished guests, venerables, eminent scholars, and our Muslim and Dharma brothers and sisters. We are indeed blessed and fortunate to listen to the wisdom and advice of our eminent speaker during these 2 days on how best to apply the teachings of Islam and Buddhism to sustain and enhance our Mother Earth ecological system. We have heard how we are inherently linked to nature, and the sustainable mission begins with oneself. Many examples were mentioned, particularly the notable Recycle and Zero Waste project selflessly led by Venerable Bhikkhuni Dr. Dhammananda from Thailand. In this session, our 2 distinguished speakers will share their thoughts and shining experiences on the role of civil societies to sustain the Earth's ecological health. Our first speaker is Mr. Muhammad Faisal Abdul Aziz. He is the president of the Muslim Youth Movement Malaysia. He studied laws and Syria at the International Islamic University Malaysia from 2006 to 2011. Later, he pursued his master's degree in laws at Mara Technology University. Among his passion as the president of ABIM is to constantly engage with interfaith organizations, advocating reform agenda and sustainable development goals. He's a coordinator of Project Bangsa Malaysia and the Malaysian Interfaith Climate Change Network. He's also the author of the book, Islam and the Future of Reformist Thought and Cosmopolitan Islam and the Forging of Bangsa Malaysia. Brother Faisal, I pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My respected colleague, Assistant Professor Dr. Karma Tashi Choedron, and all members of the floor, academicians who contributed, Dr. Farida, Dr. David Loy, and our respected guests from Tibetan Buddhists and also from Malaysia. Alhamdulillah, now we have reached to the 5th session that we continue on the topic of the role of civil society in sustaining the global world, especially in preserving or conserving our mother planet. I have a slide. Okay. Before I begin, I would like to share several phenomena that reflects the adverse effect of the climate change. Next. Okay, next. Okay, first about natural disasters. Secondly, about our food security or food crisis. And the third one is health degradation. Basically, these phenomena have shown to us the severity or the impact of our planet that we are living right now. And it is not surprise then why many kind of environmental activists name the current crisis as a climate emergency. Okay, next. Okay, first about the natural disasters in Malaysia. Even recently, Malaysia we face major flood that occurred in many states in Malaysia, and it is costly. Not only costly, but also several lives also lost. And of course, it is costly, as I said. The village folks, Malaysian citizens, the victims especially, they have to bear some costs, especially to repair their houses. They have to bear certain costs. I mean, to repair their cars and also to buy any electrical appliances. So this kind of major flood is part of the natural disasters that reflect the adverse effect of the climate change in Malaysia. And previously, when we talk about this natural disasters or major flood, we can at least expect when it will be the natural disaster or the major flood that occur in Malaysia, especially during the monsoon season. And when we talk about this topic as well, at least we can estimate to what extent the severity of the flood. For example, previously, we at least have enough facilities to contain the excess of water. But now, due to the climate change, everything has changed. Meaning to say, now we can see the unexpected weather patterns. It leads to unpredictable seasonal forecasts. And also, when we talk about the monsoon season, no longer happening within their normal times. And of course, it causes the unexpected rainfalls, uncertainty of the rain prediction, which leads to flooding. Next. Secondly, about food security or food crisis that we talk right now. When we talk about the quality of life, and when we talk about the fundamental liberties in Malaysia, Article 5 of the Federal Constitution, right to live. In many precedent of cases, Malaysian judge try to extend the meaning of right to life, touching on the right to have a quality of life. And we can see by having the issue of food crisis or food security, now the issue of quality of life, especially for our future generation, is at stake. Now we can see the usage of chemicals, for example, for mass production, excessive waste products, for example, it really affects the quality of our healthy soil. And so that's why now people always talk about how do we embark on the new ways of or to replenish the soil health, for example, by promoting regenerative farming. And of course, when we talk about regenerative farming, I would like to recommend two documentaries that I think we can have some insights. First, Kiss the Ground, and secondly, about the living soil. How, I mean, to embark on the new regenerative farming, at least to counter this food security issue. When we talk about this issue, of course, regenerative farming will increase the biodiversity and also support the biosequestration or capturing the carbon through the land. Next. And also health degradation. And as we can see now, the air pollution or haze, for example, it leads to stroke, lung cancer, heart disease, and also water pollution. Previously, we have the Kim River. Of course, it affects our health. And when we talk about water pollution, yes, of course, the main sources of water, like river, for example, when it becomes contaminated due to pollution, it can lead to health issues in humans, like, for example, cancer, cardiovascular condition, and so on. Next. And just recently as well, we faced this kind of problem, due to logging, for example, when we destroy the habitat of the wild animals, for example. So their habitat is shrinking. So now we can see the wild animals become in contact with a human being. So of course, it will cause anxiety among the public or among the society. For example, in the recent case in Kelantan, where one Aborigines or actually claimed that logging activities cause their habitat to be shrinking, and of course, it it will have impact on the human life, especially in terms of their safety, for example. Next. So, what will be our roles as CSO, especially Islamic CSO, ABIM, to preserve this environment, or at least to counter with this very adverse effect of this climate change? So we have two main roles as CSO. First, the top-down approach, and secondly, the bottom-up approach. So what will be the top-down approach? So next. First, the top-down approach, meaning to say the role as CSO to be pressure group to the government, because in Islam, in the Muslim society, we are fully aware that we as human beings, we are entrusted by God to preserve and to conserve this land, to conserve this world. We have the concept of vicegerency. We are the vicegerent of Allah. The role of Khalifah, because it is an amanah, it is a trust by God to preserve this world, to preserve this environment. So from the top-down policy or approach, so we play our role as check and balance, to check and balance the national and government policies, especially when it comes to eco-friendly policies. And we also use this kind of public advocacy mechanism. So as a young CSO, of course, it is our Herculean task to ensure that government adhere with the policies that friendly with eco or environment, and also preserve the quality of life for the future generation. Next. Okay, so among the actions taken by ABIM as a pressure group or third force movement, we become the center, the hub to mobilize the people, especially in voicing out against environmental destruction. I would like to share one example. Just recently as well, when ABIM together with Change.org, we mobilized, or we initiated the online petition, among all Malaysians, to fight against logging, for example, because it is one of the environmental destruction that caused major flood in Malaysia. And of course, and alhamdulillah, just within 2 weeks, we managed to garner more than 200,000 backers in that online petition. Other than that, we also play our roles to ensure that the current economic policy emphasize on sustainability, climate resilient, and also low carbon. So when we talk about development, we have to become NGO that always advocate the low carbon and climate resilient or sustainability policies as against the commercial, just a mere commercial development. So next. These are among the campaign that we have conducted. If you can see in the forest, we fighting against the degazettement of the permanent reserve forest status by Selangor state government, and also at the right side in the office of Suhakam, we also conduct protests against the land reclamation projects by Penang government. Not only by Penang government, but we also issued statement against the project land reclamation in Melaka, because at the end of the day, by having this kind of land reclamation project, for example, it affect or it diminish the marine life, for example, and also the quality of life of future generation. And of course, when we talk about the commercial development, for us, I mean, the question that we pose, why should you de-gazette the permanent reserve forest status just for the sake of commercial development? So these kind of things that we advocate to fight, to preserve or to conserve the environment. So next. Okay, the second approach is bottom up. It is more on educational approach, how to educate the public to preserve the environment. So we promote the moderate lifestyle. In Islam, we have wasatiyah, not to exceed in spending, for example, in consuming, for example. So anything we do, we must be moderate enough. We have to go back to our culture, our tradition, to have moderate lifestyle or wasatiyah. So we educate, or we conduct the education program for the youth, for the school students, for example, on planetary health and on eco-friendly consumption. Next. For example, we advocate the campaign consumption based on planetary health principle. Yeah, this one of the example how we empower the religious teaching as tool to educate public on preserving the environment. For example, you know, in Malaysia we have the structure of halal certificate, where the Department of Religious Affairs issue halal certificate for a restaurant, for any products that wish to sell their products to Muslim. So for us, instead of just issue halal certificate with certain criteria stipulated by religion in general, why should not we include certain eco-friendly criteria? So for us, it is like educational awareness for the public, especially to preserve environment while consuming. So for example, using recycle bins, reducing waste, avoiding plastic materials, providing alternative for use product. So this, I think, should be implemented, but of course in stages, because perhaps it will cause certain difficulties, especially for restaurant operators and so on. But in the long run, for us, this kind of campaign need to be implemented by the religious affairs in Malaysia, so that we can educate the public, as I said, when they consume certain products, they have with their full kind of awareness to preserve the environment. And we were grateful at this time. We were given a green light by Professor Dr. Azizan Baharudin when she was director of IBEM. So IBEM and Prof. Azizan invited me to bring this campaign through the radio channel of IBEM, Islamic channel. Next. And other than that, we also conducting awareness program with communities, empowerment-based projects for community. This is conducted by ABIM agency called GRASS. GRASS is agency for environment for ABIM. The first is Solar for Palu. You know when we provide certain help, especially for the earthquake victims, we are trying to educate them about preserving or conserving environment. So one of the projects conducted by ABIM and GRASS, we provide the solar panels for the earthquake victims. And other than that, we also are conducting pet water race. You know, the project is like this. We ask them to collect used bottles, for example, and transform them into valuable goods. So we have prize for that. I mean, the most creative goods and the most valuable goods that they can even produce from the collecting from the used bottle, we will give certain price. So this kind of education program with the university students, how to appreciate the used bottle, for example, how to appreciate the things that we can recycle, the recyclable materials, so that they also can become creative in terms of reuse the used bottle or materials. Next. Other than that, we're also conducting outreach program every year. For example, outreach we voicing out the aspirations and concerns, especially from the unrepresented communities like Aborigines or orang asli in Malaysia. For example, during the Earth Day, International Earth Day on 22nd of April 2021 last year, we conducting Earth Day with orang asli communities. So by having this Earth Day with orang asli, we managed to get coverage from international media as well, from Al Jazeera and also from national media. As I said, it is a program, it is an outreach program to voice out certain concerns from orang asli, from Aborigines about the destruction of forests, for example, due to, as I said, commercial development, for example. So forest ABIM, it is a must for us to amplify their concerns, their voice to national leaders and to all communities about the importance of preserving forests, because they live in a forest. Forest is about their life. Forest is about their way of life. So we have to listen to their concerns, especially as I said, honestly, when many people categorize them as unrepresented communities. Next. And more importantly, in Malaysia, ABIM together with FGIS, Friendship Group of Interreligious Services, we try to amplify the importance teaching of preserving environment by using interface concept, meaning to say, Malaysia especially, we are religious communities. In Malaysia, other than Islam, we have Buddhism, we have Hinduism, we have Christianity, and I think also Taoism and so on. So we have a lot of religion in Malaysia. And of course, as I said, Malaysian society relatively a religious community. So it is very important to amplify the campaign to preserve environment by having or by using the channel of interface. So when we launch a campaign, for example, destroying the earth is against my religion, it is kind of the new narrative brought by ABIM. And of course, MICCN, we set up the Malaysia Interface Climate Change Network. It is like a forum to ensure that all communities will be taught about the importance, their roles as a religious community, respective religious communities to preserve the environment. So regardless of whether you are Muslim, you are Buddhist, you are Hindu, or you are Christian, we have these religious leaders in FGIS, Friendship Group of Interreligious Services, to be agent, to advocate campaign to preserve environment in their house of worship and also among their communities respectively. Next. And on 11th of March 2021, we conducted an event. It is an online event because on 11th of March it was still a lockdown. In conjunction with Green Faith Sacred People Sacred Earth Day, it was initiated by Green Faith International. So from this event, we gather leaders from various religions, and from this event, all leaders in Malaysia from various religions vowed their aspiration to defend the environment and to combat climate change. Okay, next. And last but not least, we also focus on education of the environment for the children in a simple ways of caring for nature. So, like our kids, for example, the simple ways how to educate our kids, for example, children, about promoting environment. For example, we ask them not to waste. For example, by promoting wise spending, promoting recycling, sewing, repairing broken goods, for example. So this kind of the things, how to preserve the nature. And next slide. I would like to conclude with hadith. Hadith is the say of Prophet Muhammad SAW. Ar-Rahimun yarhamhumur Rahman, irhamu man fil ard, yarhamukum man fis sama. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, used to say, those who are merciful will be shown mercy by the most merciful, meaning by Allah. Be merciful to those on the earth, and the one, Allah, in the heaven will be merciful to you. Thank you very much. I pass to moderator.
Thank you, Brother Faisal, for your strong leadership to champion the various remarkable top-down and bottom-up approach and projects to promote the Earth ecological system. Thank you, brother. Our next speaker is Assistant Professor, Venerable Dr. Karma Tashi Choedron. She is a Buddhist nun from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. She is a meditation teacher focusing on mind training, calm abiding, and insight meditation. Trained as a civil engineer, she also holds a Master of Arts in Buddhist Study from the International Buddhist College, Thailand, and a PhD in Environment and Resource Study from Mahidol University, Thailand. An environmental sociologist, her doctoral thesis was on the topic of environmental ethics. Venerable Karma is currently an assistant professor in development studies at the University of Nottingham, KL, and deputy director of education at the Rajana Buddhist Council of Malaysia, and the religious advisor to the Malaysian Buddhist Consultative Council. Venerable Karma has authored many articles in academic journals and written 2 books on conservation: The Jakun and the Pahang Peat Swamp Forest, published in 2006, and Respectful Listening, The Jakun as Partner in Conservation, published in 2009. Please let me invite Dr. Karma for his next session, for the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Brother Wilson, the very kind introduction. Very good morning to all brothers and sisters, distinguished venerables, and also distinguished speakers, as well as my friends who are participating this morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to share a little bit about the role of civil society in sustaining the environment. So please allow me to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint slide which I would like to share, and I would like to know whether you're able to see the slide.
Starting up. Okay,
Starting
now we can
up,
see.
Coming up. You can see it? Okay.
Now we can see.
Thank you so much. Okay. Right. Civil society is actually a very we speak a lot about civil society, yeah. But first, allow me to introduce the concept of civil society. In fact, my colleague Encik Muhammad Faisal has really impressed upon the audience the importance of activism, yeah, advocacy, awareness raising, and these are all characteristics of civil society. ABIM being a very long-standing and very relevant and very important and socially engaged organization in Malaysia, which has done a lot of good work. Unfortunately, I do not have the I have plenty in my own personal capacity, but I do not want to actually talk about my own personal capacity. I would rather introduce civil societies which have done far better work than I have in my short number of years in this environmental field. So please allow me to first explain what I'm going to be talking about this morning. So first, I would like to just briefly introduce the concept of civil society and also environmental advocacy. And then I would like to move on to environmental movements before unfolding engaged Buddhism and Buddhist environmental movements. So here we have Fridays for Future, Greta Thunberg, yeah, the queen of environmental movements of the 21st century, a very young lady, born in 2003, but she has stood up, she has shaken up political institutions and mobilized millions of teenagers around the world by first sitting in front of the Swedish Parliament in 2018, because she was appalled at the condition of the environment and the direction that we are actually going to. Knowing that we have a small window of change, yeah, opportunity of only 10 years before irreversible climate change, this young lady expressed profound sadness to her parents and decided to do something about it. So this is basically what it means by environmentalism, yeah. So anybody can be an environmentalist. Anyone can actually do good environmental advocacy. All we need to do is mobilize, yeah. But before I explain about who and how to mobilize and what are the different ways that environmentalism manifests in this world, especially from the Buddhist perspective, I would like to first explain civil society. So civil society is actually, if you can look at the right hand side, which there is a triangle, yeah. So there is the state, which is at the top, yeah, the topmost triangle, and then the community at the bottom left, and then the businesses, private sector at the bottom right hand corner. So somewhere in the middle, the sphere of interaction between the state, which means that public agencies, government, community, meaning us, yeah, households, families, and also private firms. Somewhere in between, if you can see this inverse triangle here, yes, this is the sphere of activity of civil society organizations. In short, we call them CSOs. So basically, civil society manifests in any way, yeah? Mainly we see it in the form of community cooperation, structures of voluntary association, networking of public communication. Everything that my colleague Muhammad Faisal has actually spoken actually manifests in this triangle, yeah. So I'm actually very happy that I gave my colleague Muhammad Faisal the space to actually talk about his activities, because it's actually supporting me in my introduction of civil society. And a very important aspect of civil society is actually participatory. People actually freely, they choose to associate, they choose to communicate, they choose to actually form and reform and group and regroup until they can actually manifest in a way that which is useful to their agenda. So basically, civil society groups together for a common purpose. And what is that purpose? The purpose is manifold, yeah. It can be in terms of any kind of social movement, any kind of environmental movement. So you name it, we have seen it in the history of mankind, humankind. So what are the basic characteristics of civil society? Basically, civil society, ideal civil society should actually have the space, yeah, the political space, the freedom of autonomy to actually advocate, yeah. So we have to have relative independence from the state, and not too much aligned to the private sector also, because do not want to lose our neutrality. And the most important characteristic is that we come together to express and to defend, to express our common intention and to defend our common interest. And we have seen many areas. If you look at, my colleagues spoke about environmental advocacy in terms of Orang Asli. Yes, the Orang Asli, I've worked with them for a number of years, and I've also lived with Orang Asli for 3 years. And I can vouch for the fact that what Encik Muhammad Faisal is saying is actually quite correct, because Orang Asli are actually dwellers of the forest, and now they face impingement of the forest. So what to do? What to do when your rights are impinged upon? So immobilize, yeah. So now we have got many Orang Asli networks in Malaysia with the support of mainstream networks like, for example, ABIM and also other like university, etc., coming together in order to express a common interest. And that interest is that please let us respect the environment, let us live in harmony with nature, and let us live together with nature, and let us not be alienated from nature. So this is one very strong motivation for environmental advocacy. But while doing environmental advocacy, there are, of course, we have to be within the limits of our government, our laws, and also not to antagonize anybody. So we do it in the spirit of harmony, loving kindness, compassion. I mean, we are not going dead against the government, and neither are we actually going dead against businesses. We have to work together with the state. We have to work together with businesses. We have to work together with other civil society organizations, work together with other religious organizations. For example, faith-based organizations have got the greatest power in terms of mobilizing humankind, the human mind. So knowing where our wealth standard. So instead of being antagonistic in nature, civil society, which actually can work together and in harmony together with everyone, that is the civil society that's going to yield the best results. So let me not go into too much into detail. So I just wanted to introduce the concept of environmentalism related to civil society. So environmentalism has been there for a long, long time, even during the time of the Buddha also. And of course, during Prophet Muhammad's time also, environmentalism has already been there. But the way it's manifesting in the 21st century, it is different from how it manifested during the time of our founding fathers, the religious founders. Yeah. So environmentalism manifests the concerns of industrialized society in the 20th century. Why it's different now compared to the time of our founding fathers is because since the Industrial Revolution, our mobility has changed leaps and bounds. So we have, instead of having production units in our communities, for example, we have got large-scale production units. People started working in the factories. We started emanating black smoke, black carbon, and that black carbon is transboundary. So it's like you burn in Malaysia, you can smell it in Thailand, for example. So the extent of environmental crisis, the environmental pollution, is transboundary, and its impact has already been identified by scientists as going to be irreversible if we do not do anything by 2030, which means that the global warming, the irreversible climate change, which is like beyond the 2 degrees Celsius, if we do not collectively do something about it now, we are all going to actually suffer a major climate disaster. This is the mobilization that we are talking about in the 20th century. The sudden realization that, if we do not do something about it, we are going to be scorched in the next 10 years. Yeah, we will have no food to eat. Food security will be compromised. We will have no water to drink. This realization came about. It's not like overnight, but it was very, very slow realization, because environmental problems manifest only many, many decades later, after, for example, introducing lead, introducing black carbon into the atmosphere. We start seeing climate change, irreversible climate change, the melting of the glaciers, and then also floods and all the irreversible damage that we see in the environment today. So what can we do about it? Is it something for an individual to do, or is it something for communities to do? Is it something that the state should do? Is it something that the business should do? Should we regulate business? Should the state clamp down on businesses? Should they shut down businesses? Should we actually go back to appropriate technology, lead simple lives? What should we do? So there are multiple perspectives here. So basically, civil society organizations involved in environmental issues are highly diverse. They pursue various interests, from environmental protection, sustainable development, poverty alleviation, animal welfare. And where did these ideas culminate? So the landmark date, which is 1992 Rio Summit. So Agenda 21. It is during that time that civil society actually blossom in its entirety. The vastness and rigorousness that we see in civil society today is all thanks to the Rio Summit in 1992, which classified civil society as women, children, youth, indigenous, non-governmental organizations. Many different kinds of groupings are called civil society. And before that, civil society was not deemed important. The onus was on the state to regulate businesses, and then we come up with a solution for climate change. But as we know, it's not very easy to regulate businesses. And the state also is actually tied to business also. So there is also conflict of interest when it comes to the state and businesses. So what can we do? So what can an individual do? Especially an individual who has been alienated from their forest, an individual who has to suffer incinerator at the backyard. For example, Alice lives here, Broga incinerator, where this young lady mobilized the entire Broga community in Malaysia, and she managed to get the incinerator scrapped, from the Selangor development plan. How did she do it? So these are all small milestones if I can just share with you very quickly, from 1945, NGOs started pushing for inserting human rights language into UN Charter. NGOs were not all that important, yeah, because states were more important. Kings were more important at that time, yeah. Dictators were more important. But slowly, after World War II, yeah, when United Nations started, Nations was established, then we started seeing UN conferences for human and environment. And it is during the 1972 conference that it was one of the first times that we saw the rise of CSOs. At that time, we call it NGOs, yeah. So CSOs came in a little bit later. And the word NGO, non-governmental organization, is part of CSO. So in 1980s, forestry concerns were included in the agenda of intergovernmental deliberations. And then pre-1992, we had the environmental processes where CSOs started coming in order to prepare themselves to participate in the 1992 Rio conference. And then in 1992, the Earth Summit, never forget this, the Earth Summit Agenda 21 affirmed that the commitment and genuine involvement of non-state actors. Who are non-state actors? It is us. It is us, the civil society actors, whether you're from a faith-based organization, academia, or an individual like Greta Thunberg, sitting in front of the Swedish Parliament. We are all non-state actors, and we are all critical to reaching sustainable development goals. Civil society is a term which is so difficult to explain that, that I tried my level best to at least let you know that it is diverse. So now let us move into social movements. What are social movements actually? So civil society organizations, there are many who actually do good works like WWF and also Wetlands International in Malaysia. We have got Malaysian Nature Society. We've got so many of these, yeah. But they do incremental work, and their work is very important, but they do not immediately manifest, and their impact may not be as strong as social movements. Now, what is the difference between social movement and all the other NGOs? A social movement is a network of informal interactions between a plurality of individuals, groups, and organizations. And when do social movements come about? When there is disaster. When there is a disaster, when there is a very, very strong motivation. For example, people feel very tired and the fear of Greta Thunberg and others, our young society, when they start feeling fear and their helplessness and they do not know what to do, that is the time they mobilize. And one of the great successes of social movement is that when people have a shared active identity or a shared collective motivation. Here, we are all human beings. We are all human beings and we are all going to die if we do not do something about reversing climate change right now. So this is the reason why social movements have been far more effective as civil society compared to other civil society organizations. So let me very quickly introduce to you what's a social movement. Social movement is a terminology introduced by the German sociologist Lawrence von Stein in 1848. Yeah, it's actually a political movements fighting for the social rights which are understood as welfare rights. So it suddenly culminates when there is a sense of urgency, and bingo, we have a sense of urgency in the 21st century. Now, what kinds of sense of urgency we have? Transboundary pollution, which leads to irreversible climate change. I think that is the major one that we're focusing on. And environmental movements have come and have gone. It's not, they come and go according to the need of the day. But there are environmental movements which still persist till today. And new environmental movements keep coming up. So we have got environmental movements like, for example, the Chipko movement in India is a tree hugging movement, the Narmada Bachao movement, Save Ganga movement. Why I mention India is because the tree hugging movement, which is very popular, started from India. And what kind of social movements in India? In the 1700s, in a place called Kajarli, Marwar region, Rajasthan state, there was this one young lady. Her name was Amrita Devi. She was a Bishnoya. She, along with other villagers, she hugged the tree. She's against the king of the land wanted to cut all the trees in order to build a new palace. And these women said that no, we would rather our heads be cut off than have our trees, than lose our trees. So if the trees are saved in exchange of our head, it will be a cheap transaction, Amrita Devi. And her head was cut off. But at the end, but later, after cutting off 300 over people's heads, finally the king realized that the people are very persistent. And this became the first environmental movement in India. So we also have got other movements like Chipko movement, tree hugging movement, which is a mirroring of this Bishnoi movement. So we've got tree huggers. Where did the tree huggers come from? The tree huggers came from this Amrita Devi. Yeah? So you've got so many other movements. And now please allow me to explain to you from the perspective of Buddhism, which I think is why I'm probably invited here. Yeah. So my teacher, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, coined this term engaged Buddhism in the 1950s. So what he did was he took some aspects of Buddhism and said that, look here, the whole world is suffering. And at that time of Vietnam War, and then world wars just ended, and the world was recovering from serious human rights abuses and serious environmental destruction. So monks, Buddhists, especially monks, cannot just sit inside the temples and do nothing about it. So monks must actually come out and do something and help society. In the past, monks were basically confined to their temples and spreading loving kindness and compassion from the confines of their temples, hoping and praying that it will reach the masses. But in Tibetan Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, we have this concept of aspiration bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. Aspiration bodhicitta is the intention to want to help alleviate the suffering of the world. But we just cannot have the intention without actually doing something about it. So that's where we call it the engaged bodhicitta. So this engaged bodhicitta and engaged Buddhism is one and the same thing. So it's a fresh new look at Buddhism. And what is so fresh about it? In the 20th century, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh said that come out of your temples and start serving sentient beings. How do we serve them? So it's like there are many contemporary situations which warrant direct intervention from the Sangha, from the Buddhist community, especially the monks who always sit in the temple, in generally speaking, in the past. Yeah, but now we see a very radical change where the clergy, the Buddhist clergy, are actually coming out because of social, political, environmental, economic suffering and injustices that we see in every community that around the world. So it is time that we leave the comfort of a meditation cushion and come out to serve sentient beings. So engaged Buddhism applies the teachings of the Buddha to social life in order to bring about social change. And environmental advocacy is one of the ways of social change. So according to Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, to be is to interbe. So we are who we are, but we are not who we are if we are not related to others. Since everything is interrelated, there's nothing in this world that arises on its own. Everything arises depending on causes and condition. We can never stand alone. We are dependent on the trees, the sun, the moon, the water, and the kindness of others in growing the food, in bringing the food to us, cooking the food for us. So we are definitely not standalone beings. Realizing our interconnectedness, this is the primary motivation for a social movement of this kind. Yeah, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh's vision of engaged Buddhism, that since we are indebted to the entire universe for our sustenance, and if the environment is ruined, we will never sustain. We will not be able to sustain because we are interconnected. So we have to be with every other thing because in reality, we are every other thing. So the concept of engaged Buddhism has been picked up by Ajahn Sulak Sivarasa, and also His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, is also a major advocate of engaged Buddhism. Even though we do not, His Holiness may probably not use the word engaged Buddhism, but His Holiness and Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh are all singing the same tune. They are saying that socially engaged Buddhism extends across public engagement in carrying and with social environmental protest. So it's a non-violent way of overcoming conflict by channeling your energies for a common good. And that common good is coming out and helping to alleviate the suffering of this world. And there are 14 precepts promulgated by Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh. I do not want to go through all the 14. Let me just select very, the ones that are relevant to environment. And one of the things is this number 4. Number 4 is do not avoid suffering or close your eyes before suffering. Do not lose awareness of the existence of suffering in the life of the world. Find ways to be with those who are suffering, including personal contact, visits, images, and sounds. I believe this is what my colleague is doing, isn't it? Yeah, Encik Muhammad Faisal, you are doing this already. So you are not avoiding suffering, and neither is your organization, and neither are so many others. Wherever we see people taking action, I believe that they are in touch with reality, and the reality is that suffering is everywhere. And the moment we lose sight of it, then we cease to actually be of any use to humanity. So this is very important. And number 5, do not accumulate wealth while millions are hungry. Do not take as the aim of your life fame, profit, wealth, or sensual pleasure. Live simply and share time, energy, and material resources with those who are in it. Number 1, we wake up to the suffering of the world. Number 2, non-wastage and giving, kindness in giving, which I believe is the basic characteristic of civil society, and also civil society organizations or social movements. People give their time, people give their energy, people all come together for common purpose, yeah, right? And then people do it without anger, hopefully, yeah? So do not maintain anger or hatred. So learn to penetrate and transform when there are still seeds in your consciousness. As soon as they arise, turn your attention to your breath in order to see and understand the nature of your hatred, meaning that there's a lot of suffering and injustice in this world, but there is a way of going and doing things without hatred. There's a way to change this world while living amidst hatred and conflict. We can be unstained by the mud of conflict. We can actually blossom like a wonderful, beautiful lotus without succumbing to hatred. And this is a very important method of actually having civil environmental advocacy or any kind of social advocacy. Non-hatred, non-violence. And do not lose yourself in dispersion and in your surroundings. Mindful readings. We are in touch with our reality through mindfulness, through loving kindness, through compassion. We plant seeds of joy, peace, and understanding in ourselves. So the roots of civil society is none other than ourselves, actually. Every individual has the power to transform the environment around them. So I'm not talking about the natural environment, I'm talking about the social and any other kind of environment. So it only needs one person, one peaceful person who knows how to live in the present moment to go out there and make a world of difference. And that includes reversing climate change. And this is what Greta Thunberg has a small little child has showed us, yeah. So we do not utter words that can cause discord. So as civil society, people who work in civil society organizations know this. Yeah? So if we were to have conflict, if we were to be antagonistic, we are not peaceful in our approach in doing environmental advocacy or any kind of advocacy. We will not win. We will never be able to triumph. Yeah. So we only triumph, and nobody will want to listen to us with our words of discord. If we work together, interreligious harmony, for example, right, as my colleague said, so many in groups coming together, then that is the basic way of actually trying to do good in this world. So do not use any kind of community, any kind of social community, civil society in order for our own personal transformation. The motivation has to be altruistic. And we do not live in a way that is harmful to humans and nature. So we do not invest in companies that deprive others of their chance to live. So we select a vocation, a livelihood that helps realize our ideal of compassion. So we do not kill, we do not let others kill, and we find whatever means possible to protect life and prevent war. And we possess nothing that should belong to others. We respect the property of others, but prevent others from profiting from human suffering kindly, compassionately, without conflict. So I believe these are some very beautiful precepts that were promulgated by Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh. And not only Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, he was not the only one. I mean, he's not the only one who started has worked for environmental and social justice. Master Zheng Yan from Taiwan, I think she is the face of Tzu Chi, and everybody knows, yeah, across the globe. So Taiwan has an impressive record for recycling. Without a doubt, Tzu Chi volunteers spread across more than 1,800 recycling stations and points in Taiwan and across the world have contributed to this success. Master Cheng Yen is also very well aware of the suffering of the world. She did not alienate herself from it. She realized it and she told her followers, please do something about it and please do something for the entire world. And there you see such volunteers manifesting everywhere, right? Like small little bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas mean that people who work for the benefit of others, yeah? So Sochi recycling volunteers have realized the urgent imperative of environmental protection, and they take their master's word very, very seriously, and they're everywhere. Whenever disaster strikes, whether it is COVID disaster, whether it's environmental disaster, earthquake, wherever it is, Sochi volunteers are there. So this is like, in Buddhism, I feel, and I teach my students also, that this is the number one civil society organization, faith-based organization, which has truly made a difference across the world and cut across religious and cultural barriers. And we have Thai environmental movements. Like ordination is very important for a human being, for a Buddhist to be ordained as a monk or a nun is a privilege. We wear the robes, and the robes are a guide for us in order to think well, speak well, and act well. So when a tree is ordained, it cannot be cut anymore. So because of serious deforestation in Thailand, so the monks of Chiang Mai, so the northern Thailand, Anuraksa, they are the ones who actually started this concept of ordaining a tree. So they tie a yellow cloth symbolic of the robe of the monk, and nobody touches the tree. And this phenomenon has also has also manifested in Cambodia and Vietnam and Burmese and among Burmese monks in the last 2.5 decades. So what to do if one listens to you, ordain a tree, right? And you can read Susan M. Darlington's book, The Ordination of a Tree, a 2012 publication. Okay, in terms, and other masters also in the Buddhist tradition, Tibetan Buddhist environmental movement, for example, the Gyalwang Karmapa started Koryuk, because he's passionate about the environment and realized that we also have a very serious environmental disaster in the Tibetan plateau. The glaciers are melting. And when the Tibetan plateau melts, who is going to suffer downstream? The people in the Gangetic plains are going to suffer, having no water, and during the rainy season, they are going to suffer a lot of landslides, mudslides, etc., like Choedron and all these kind of disasters that we have seen. Right, so Koryuk has done many awareness raising and also actively promoted vegetarianism in monasteries across India and the Himalayan region. Then Gyalwang Drukpa is another very interesting head of the Drukpa Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. So the Gyalwang Drukpa is an active environmentalist, educator, and spiritual head of the Drukpa lineage. And Gyalwang Drukpa is very unique because he empowers women and he empowers the nuns. He is the one who actually started the Kung Fu nuns tradition in his nunneries in Nepal. And these Kung Fu nuns are the ones who have cycled 2,000 kilometers across Himalayan region in order to spread environmental awareness. So meaning that they, from Kathmandu right up to Leh Ladakh, going through some of the most treacherous regions in the Himalayan region in order to pick up rubbish and in order to show people that they stand in solidarity with all other environmentalists in this world. And they realize that as monastics, that we should not be sitting in our temples and just praying so that other people do the work, but we ourselves should come out and start raising awareness and start picking up the rubbish and start living life very, very frugally and be an inspiration to other people through our body, speech, and mind, through our actions. Yeah. So here you see Gyalwang Drukpa is actually cycling a bicycle together with his nun. 2,000 kilometers is not a small feat. So this is also faith-based organizations are also civil society organizations. And I believe that I have captured the essence of what civil society organizations can do, are doing, and have done. And I really hope that this inspire many more. Instead of sitting down on your meditation cushion, come out and serve sentient beings, because we only have less than 10 years before irreversible climate change. And when climate change happens, irreversible climate change happens, then we will see a billion-fold greater suffering than we see today. And this is real. As an environmental sociologist, I am telling you also that the climate science, even though we have a lot of people who say that climate science is not real, climate science is real. We can see it manifesting everywhere, and it is time that we take action. And let us come together either as an individual or through your respective faith-based organizations or any civil society organization, or join a social movement, or register yourself on as a member on Avas, or sign Avas petitions, online social movement petitions, and let your voice be heard. Plant a seed of environmental consciousness in your mind today and the mind of others. And I'm sure that it will germinate very, very quickly like mushrooms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Karma, for educating us on the pivotal role of CSO. You have shared many examples, the social movement like the Turkey environmental movement. I think those are excellent examples and hopefully inspiration for many of us to follow. So now we come to the Q&A time. We use the same format like all the other earlier session. Please raise your hand function in Zoom if you have any question to ask. Otherwise, you can post it on the chat group. And if you intend to ask the question over Zoom, please unmute yourself and then ask your question, after which you then mute yourself. So let me have a look here to see whether we have anyone raising the hand. Okay, so let me just scroll it. I have a question here from Brother Tan Chi Kyong. It's a rather long question, or perhaps a comment, but just let me read it. Mr. Faisal, I was excited by you and Brother Peg interview by Bernama about IBED conference. I wonder if in Malaysia we have a national level IBED conference in Bahasa Melayu. I think there are two obstacles in my wishful thinking. First, as long as Buddhist community does not take initiative to use Bahasa Melayu as the medium of communication in the form of publication and speeches within their own community, it will be rather challenging. If you use English, as you would turn off many Muslim grassroots participation, and if you use Bahasa Melayu, you will turn on many Buddhist grassroots who uses Chinese or English as their lingua franca. Second, as long as the Islamic authorities in Malaysia continue to champion for non-usage of Bahasa Melayu in the non-Muslim communities and publication for fear of proselytization, it will also discourage the Buddhist community to use Bahasa Melayu as a medium of communication. Brother Faisal, would you like to comment, please?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Brother Chi Kyong Tan, for the suggestion. I think it is a good suggestion to conduct or to prolong this discussion. Actually, first, you know, even in fact, not only in Malaysia but in the global world, we have the issue of so-called xenophobia, or that disunite the communities across the globe. So at least having this conference like conducted by TBCC and ABIM and our friends organizing committees ISPAC, at least it is kind of the new narrative. We focus on what can unite us, focusing on the common ground, common solutions that we trying to have, especially in terms of ecology, sustainability issues, as compared to the sentiments that, as I said, that disunite us. So it is timely, of course, to have this conference, and also to, as I said, to prolong this conference, not only at the international level, but also perhaps one day we can conduct this at the national level, so that all communities, especially maybe from the village folks, for example, they can appreciate more their roles respectively, regardless of religions, to fight for environment. Thank you for your suggestion.
Right. Thank you, Brother Faisal. Dr. Karma, there's a question for you from Mr. Nuruddin Al-Akbar. The question is, can you explain the similarities or differences between the ideas of engaged Buddhism and liberation theology in Latin America?
Hi, thank you so much for your question. To be very honest with you, I'm not familiar with the liberation theory of Latin America, so I am unable to make a back-to-back comparison. However, I would like to just make a very general, give a general overview of engaged Buddhism and how it can be, and how it's actually manifesting in many other different environmental movements I see. Yeah? It doesn't matter whether it is a Latin American movement or it is a Malaysian movement, but the spirit of engaged Buddhism is very, very, very simple. If you see suffering, and if it touches you, then you go out there and you do something about it without harming others, meaning that without having a mind of a conflicted mind, without having a mind of a toxic mind where we go and we complain incessantly about everything under the sun. We complain about politics, we complain about politicians, we complain about our environment, we complain about everything under the sun. The thing here is to stop complaining and to start doing something about it. And because complaining stems from a mind which is rooted in some sort of conflict, and that conflict is actually rooted in hatred. A hatred mind, meaning that a mind is a painful mind which cannot see a way out. But a liberated mind is something which engaged Buddhism is trying to teach us, that it's just a simple choice, and whether you want to live in utter despair or you want to come out and do something about it. If not for yourself, if not for others, at least do it for yourself. So instead of, and then most people think that civil society, meaning that we have got to go there and shout slogans, that is a conflicted mind. So according to Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, if you go out there and shout slogans, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. People who chant slogans and who manifest hatred in the streets in the form of demonstrations and all, these people have not actually been able to benefit themselves. So how can they benefit others? How can they benefit the environment? First, in order to benefit the environment, first we have got to check our own minds and see where is motivation coming from. Is it for some personal motivation, which is fair enough because we all don't want to die to be scorched by the sun in 10 years' time. And if we can feel a little bit more for others, then we come out and then we start doing something. If we cannot come out physically during the lockdowns, we can at least sign a petition. There are hundreds of petitions out there. Or we can stand in solidarity with somebody else, say a good word, popularize or raise awareness of somebody else's activities. Like I'm very pleased with my brother Muhammad Faisal and ABIM's activities. So I will definitely not hesitate to raise awareness and share with my other friends also what are the good works that are being done. So this is engaged Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism is not about trying to come up with something spectacular for oneself or to glorify oneself in order to or to become popular, but it's actually to do something to help somebody who is suffering. And if we ourselves are suffering in terms of our mind, and then if we feel that we are incapable, we can at least support somebody else by signing a petition. Once we are ready, once we feel that our minds are capable of doing such work, then we physically come out and we help alleviate the suffering of the world. I don't know whether my explanation makes sense, but that's how I understand it.
Thank you, Dr. Karma. Indeed, right speech and right actions is really the essence of all that we're talking about to really improve our ecological system. There's another question for you, Dr. Karma. How about the ecological engagement of the Buddhist community in Indonesia? How do they work with the Muslim community in Indonesia to achieve their goal for ecological health?
Thank you so much for your question. I wish I'm more well versed in the Indonesian context. I wish someone had asked me about the Malaysian context. Yeah. I have got many friends in Indonesia who are actually doing quite good work in terms of environmental advocacy, and some of them are actually Sangha also. Sangha meaning the community of monks and nuns. Yeah. So maybe just to share with you something that my friends are doing in Indonesia, that it's very simple. They practice vegetarianism. They do not harm other sentient beings. Yeah. And then they also actively, they have their own farms, they are into organic farming, and then the produce that they produce without pesticides, herbicides and all, and then they eat that in their community, their practice community. Pretty much the same as you see in other parts of the world also, like in the Himalayan region, for example, also. And even in Thailand, there is a Ajahn, I cannot remember the name now, but he has got a vast tract of land in Chiang Mai, and he cultivates all different types of fruit and vegetables for own consumption. So basically what they are doing is they're living sustainably on a very, what do I mean by sustainable? Meaning that they do not, they try not to purchase food from outside as best as possible, and to be very self-sufficient, to grow what they need to grow in their own vegetable plots, and also to save the money to generate income for their monasteries, and at the same time, their bodies are untouched by pesticides and herbicides, and at the same time, whatever little surplus that they have, they can generate income for their monasteries. That's as much as I know. But if you ask me about the Malaysian context, I would say that we still have got quite a long way to go in terms of our environmental realization in Malaysia. And people like me should actually be doing more. But I have not been able to do more because I have also been busy sitting on my meditation cushion and also busy lecturing in my lecture theatre. To be very honest with you, it's true. Yeah, I can talk, but then again, I'm very interested in combining my effort with others. If there's anyone from the Buddhist community who wants to combine the efforts, let us all work together. But having said that, Sechi is already here in Malaysia for many, many years, and you can see their recycling centers. And Sechi recycling centers are in Indonesia as well. Sechi recycling centers are everywhere, yeah? And and I myself send my whatever, I Venerable Tenzin Dadun, who is also now here with me. She is very paramount in my household. What she does is that smallest little thing she will recycle, and at the end of every month she clears up the entire house. She packs everything into plastic, aluminium, and then paper, and then she ties them up, and then she dumps it into the car, and then I drive it to the recycling center. So these are small little efforts that we can do. And thanks to Sechi being in every neighborhood, including Bandar Sri Damansara, where we both live, we just every third Sunday, we send it to the recycling center, and then you see the volunteers coming with open arms. They are coming, and then they're accepting our garbage. Yeah, garbage for us, but for them, it is their master's wish, and the devotion that you see in the eyes of the Sechi volunteers, I tell you, is something that you must really, really respect. From the bottom of my heart, when I see the Sechi volunteers, their hands are dirty. They spend the entire Sunday morning recycling. It's very tough work, and I see old and frail uncles sitting down there, aunties sitting down there, and doing with so much of compassion, with so much of love for humanity. I think that's environmental awareness, that's civil society. And civil society is not something big, It's you. It's your own self. You are civil society. The moment you realize that you are civil society, you're already doing environmental work, like Venerable Dr. Tenzin Dadun.
Thank you, Dr. Karma. Okay, there's another question here for Brother Faisal. I'm interested in your explanation in which you state ecology as the unifying language of different religious groups. Can you explain further how IBEM arrived at the idea of promoting ecology as a language of interfaith dialogue and also a foundation for building cooperation between religious groups in Malaysia? Brother Faisal?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nuruddin or Brother Nuruddin. Actually, Malaysia, uh, environmental projects, I mean, as a unifying language among diverse communities, it is part and parcel of our project to have, we coin the term of Bangsa Malaysia or the nation of Malaysia. You know, Malaysia is a multicultural society. We are multi-religious. And as I said before, of course, we have or we face certain problems, especially when it comes to the issue of unity, when, you know, there are certain sentiments, for example, played by certain quarters, I mean, to disunite us. So we come with the solution-based agenda, meaning to say, what if we try to focus on the common ground? Because at the end of the day, when we talk about solution, I think all religious communities in Malaysia, we want to have solution. So why not we sit together, present on the table our concerns and also our solutions together. So one of the solutions that we draw is that how to find solution on the issue of climate change, or how to fight for climate justice. And as I said, last year we launched a program through platform FGIS and MICCN, at least to spread awareness among religious communities in Malaysia, respectively, by having religious leaders across Malaysia to have their vow to defend climate justice. And of course, still it is a long way to go. It is not, as I said, an overnight project. And we hope this initiative will be taken by all the communities. And I echo with Venerable Dr. Tashi. She mentioned about the real situation is ourselves. So when we talk about MICCN, ABIM, DBCC, or FGIS, it is just a mere part of the action taken by the society. And all of us, within individual, we have to, I mean, we can play our role, even a minor role, for example, to defend climate justice, and to play our role as a religious community, regardless of whether you are Christian, you are Buddhist, you are Muslim, you can give, I mean, you can spread awareness through religious teaching to find a common ground for this environment.
Thank you, thank you, Brother Faisal. While we are waiting for further question, I have questions to ask Brother Faisal and Dr. Karma. Firstly, thank you for sharing your very illustrious projects, and I think they're very inspiring. But I believe that you face challenges as you pursue these projects because they are indeed challenging. Perhaps each of you can share what are your personal challenges as you embark on your projects. Maybe Brother Faisal.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, there are a lot of challenges when we talk about this project. I could say when we talk about environmental justice or climate justice project, like promoting recycle, of course, Malaysia is a so-called diverse in terms of their background landscape. I mean, we have urban side and also a rural side. And of course, when we talk about doing something, reuse or recycle, of course, it needs time to make people, especially the vast majority from the rural area, to really understand. I mean, to amplify. The importance of this kind of recycling project and so on. And as I said in the presentation, how to use religion, for example, green technology in house ownership. Of course, we have a lot of challenges, because not all communities really understand how to ensure that the house ownership is really green, especially in terms of the green mosque, for example, in our cultural society and so on. So during for example, breakfast, for example. So, but of course, it is a process. How to promote event like breakfast, not using plastic and so on. Of course, there are a lot of challenges to implement.
Thank you, Brother Faisal. Dr. Karma, how about you share some of the personal challenges you face besides needing more time for meditation?
Right. Actually, I have been involved in environmental advocacy since 1992. Since I was 17, I started with a small-scale recycling project in my school, and from there, I've given talks, so many talks across the world, and I also personally changed my lifestyle from very extravagant one to a very simple one, that of a monk, and also adopted a vegetarian lifestyle in order to, because as we know, vegetarianism is not only to save the life of an animal, which is very important, but vegetarianism is advocated because of the huge amounts of methane gas that are emitting from the flatulence of livestock across the world, and also the huge amounts of deforestation in order to have livestock pastures across the world. Yeah, so the more we eat meat, the more we are actually contributing to greenhouse gas emissions in the form of CH4, methane gas. So so basically, the major challenge is to actually impress upon people why we need to actually cut down our consumption patterns, and especially in we cannot impose our values on others, right? So in fact, even I have been relatively unsuccessful in also trying to share the concept of vegetarianism with family members, and until today I stand to be the only family member who is vegetarian, and nobody else seems to want to to change their consumption patterns. And why this is a challenge is because people still cannot see the 2030 looming crisis, which is looming over our heads. Once the climate change is irreversible, meaning that we have already passed the threshold of 3 degrees Celsius above industrial limits, yeah, then we are gone. So you have no food to eat, you'll have no water to drink, and instead of oil wars, we will have water wars in the future. So in the future, conflicts will all be related to our basic needs, for example, shelter, food, water, and the short-sightedness of people in this world is one of the reasons why, which is fueling environmental crisis. So the next time we pick up a bottle of water, or we waste water, we have to think about how many people do not actually have water to drink, and how many people do not have water to wash. So if I would encourage anyone to actually take a trip to rural India or Africa, and also in parts of rural Malaysia also, and see whether we have enough water or not. I've worked in Borneo, I've worked in Sabah, Sarawak, and all that. There's not enough water. Believe it or not, there isn't enough water, clean water to drink. So once you're put in that kind of situations, only then can you appreciate what you have. But until such a time, it's very difficult. So this is my major challenge, actually. The major challenge is how can we actually transform the minds of young people are much better now, but the older generation, like people above 30 years old, 35 years old, very difficult to actually get the message across, because they've already been in this consumption pattern for many years, and it's very difficult to change. So that's very good question, Brother Wilson. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Karma, for sharing your personal challenges. We have a question from the Zoom participant, Geshe Tashi. You may unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you for the both speakers. Very inspiring in a speech. My question is, to Dr. Venerable Choedron. Talking about social movement, in the West, when you are studying social anthropology or something like that, certain movement to become a social movement, one of the key factors, there must be a deep grievances or deep sense of unfair treatment to receive from your opponents. Your opponent's treatment is very unfair. Therefore, there's a deep sense of grievances that really fuels the movement to start and to continue. So on the one hand, if we agree with that as one of the key factors, certain movement to become social movement, on the one hand, to have that kind of grievances, but same time not holding anger or grudge towards your opponents. How can you do that from the practical point of view? Thank you.
Thank you so much, respected Geshila. I believe that Geshila already has the answer to this question, but still I will try to do justice to the audience by answering your question. Yes, absolutely true, Geshila. Yes, from the Western social anthropology perspective, yes, there is a need for a particular grievance, a sense of marginalization. When one is marginalized and one's rights are impinged upon, then yes, people collectively come together in order to set whatever that is wrong right again. And that usually follows with a lot of personal anger, grudge, and bitterness. So this is why I would like to fall back upon the concept of bodhicitta from the Mahayana Buddhist perspective. I believe that the concept of bodhicitta can never steer us in the wrong direction. And first, let me explain to our participants what the concept of bodhicitta is. Bodhicitta is actually a mind of enlightenment. It's actually a spirit of wanting to alleviate the suffering of others, because we cannot bear to see the suffering of others. It's not because we are angry that people are suffering. It's because we have bodhicitta is motivated by, it's grounded in compassion and loving kindness. It's a very strong sense of sorrow that's coming within oneself, that somebody else is suffering and I need to do something about it. That is bodhicitta. So when we sit on our cushions, which is important too, yeah, we generate the aspiring bodhicitta, meaning that we want to do something about it, and then we train our minds towards it without anger. And once we are sufficiently capable of not responding in anger, then we can doing some meaningful works outside of our meditation cushion, outside of our practice centers. And that is what we call engaged bodhicitta. Engaged bodhicitta is akin to engaged Buddhism, where we first realize that suffering is actually, from the Buddhist perspective, is actually coming from the deeds that we have done in the past. So nothing happens without any reason. Everything happens depending on causes and conditions. And we have created those causes and conditions. It's not that somebody else created it for us. So we either as an individual or collectively created those causes and conditions. And so therefore now we cannot complain. So we should have realized when we were making those decisions, the wrong decisions, which actually put us in this position in the first place of suffering. So now that we realize that we are already suffering and we realize that others are suffering, so if we were to be caught up in the web of anger, then we are only going to perpetuate more suffering and we will end up suffering even more in the future. So that's not a very wise thing to do. So the wisest thing to do is acknowledge that we have actually created the causes and conditions for our own suffering, and we are the only ones who can actually come out of this mess. And to come out of this mess, we must be very careful not to be stuck in the mud of anger. So only to the realization of how we came here is because of mental poisons of anger and also greed, rooted in ignorance. This is the reason why we are here. So in order to undo that, so the last thing we should do is revisit anger and greed. So what we should do is we should actually start to cultivate a mind which is exact opposite, the mind of patience, loving kindness, compassion, and giving. So we give our time. Instead of being greedy, we give our time. So that is also a bodhisattva activity. Instead of being angry, we realize where we are coming from, and then we start to try to raise awareness. So instead of being angry, so we actually can raise awareness. Instead of lamenting, so we see that, look here, we try our level best, yeah? So if it works, it's fine. If not, there must be some greater karmic obstacle which we are unable to solve at this point in time, but we keep going, and we must realize that change cannot be, change is not overnight. Rome was not built in a day. And if we were to start doing our environmental advocacy one day and the next day we give up, so then that's not very wise also, because it took a long time for us to come to this situation where we are in this mud that we are in now. So it will take a very, very long time to also undo the patterns of consumption, to undo the whatever injustices, to undo all the negativities that we have in this world. It takes time, but negativity cannot be negativity cannot be diffused by negativity. Negativity can only be diffused by positivity, loving kindness, and compassion. So it's like the Buddha said, hatred cannot be appeased by hatred. Hatred can only be appeased by love. And Mahatma Gandhi also said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. So this is, I think, these are some very great people who have done a lot of social, who actually started social movements of their own. The Buddha started a social movement of the Bhikkhu and Bhikshuni Sangha. And Mahatma Gandhi started the Satyagraha, which is a social movement which finally managed to gain independence from India without bloodshed. So, and we see that Mahatma Gandhi did not have an ounce of anger. He lived very simply, and he had loving kindness and compassion for everyone, including the British too. So, and if they could be successful, the historical Buddha and Mahatma Gandhi, why not we? So that's my take on it, Geshe-la. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Karma. We can see from your passion as a social environmentalist, sharing with us and shedding the light for many of us. There's another question here directing to both Dr. Karma and Brother Faisal. Often people do not believe in global warming or the water crisis because this phenomena, just pardon me, this phenomena will occur in the future and not in front of their eyes. How can Islamic and Buddhist perspective convince the Malaysian and the global public that the future threat is real? In comparison, in the case of COVID, there are still many who do not believe in the existence of a virus. So, Brother Faisal, you'd like to start first?
Yeah, I think just a short comment. Even in fact in the Quran, it was stated clearly that Zahara fasad fil ard bima kasab aydin nas fil barri wal bahr bima kasab aydin nas. You know, it is an obvious corruption of fasad in this earth because of the hands of human being, and it reflects the issue of environmental degradation that we face right now. So, you know, at the end of the day, when we talk about global warming, when we talk about the facade or the corruption that happen in this world, it is because of our hands or consequences of our hands. So I'm not a scientist, especially in in explaining in a scientific way, but we can see the current issue as I see in the presentation, the major flood, for example, the water pollution, the food crisis, and so on. It reflects the current climate crisis that we face right now. Thank you.
I will also try to answer the question, Brother Wilson. Okay, basically we cannot convince people who do not want to be convinced. It's very difficult, yeah. It's the same as, it's like this. We all know that we are going to die. But there, how many of us actually live in accordance with the principles of our religion, you know, like do good, avoid evil, purify the mind? We don't, yeah. So it's like halfway, you know, we suddenly forget and we go back to square one, being unmindful again, you know. So but death is real. We cannot say that everybody in this world knows that death is real, but we forget. Yeah. So in the same way, people who may not be able to appreciate climate change and all, I would like to invite them. Maybe I should organize a trip to India or somewhere, yeah? Or to sub-Saharan Africa and see the dwindling water tables and see the aridification, the desertification. And perhaps we should live 1 month there and then we will come back very different. It's like it's like for us Buddhists, we go for meditation retreats and then our teachers talk about death and impermanence again and again and again and again in a controlled environment, and from there we slowly change our minds. Or if we see a dead body, if we go to a funeral, then instantly we change our minds for 2 days. But 2 days is better than not at all, yeah. So in the same way, I think that we can organize some kind of tours to places which people live in less, underprivileged people, because of the effects of people like in countries, developed countries like how we live our lives, we do not see the impact on others. So women are the first to face the impacts of ecological crisis, and also the poor. So it's like people sitting in palaces, people sitting in offices and mansions may not feel the impact right now, but the impact is already being felt by people in the Gangetic Plains, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and even Malaysia. By the Orang Asli, they are already starting to see the impacts. Why don't we go and visit them? Live with them for 3 days and see whether we can tahan or not. Tahan meaning, can we actually sustain? If we can sustain, then it's good for us, but I believe that we cannot. So that is awareness raising. That's also a civil society advocacy that I was talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karma. Indeed, a very good suggestion. Well, we have time for one last question. And this question to address to both speakers: how do we sustain hope while seeing such climate injustice and the violence against Mother Earth? How do we move past the sorrow while also holding the guilt or shame of knowing that our own consumption pattern may be contributing to the harm of the climate crisis, as we actively try to go waste-free, lower carbon footprint, vegan, and so on? Brother Faisal, you want to start first?
Boleh. Yeah, okay. Just 3 points, short points. Okay, first, in Islam, we are talk about the moderate lifestyle. You know, the term of wasatiyah. I mean, you should not be excessive not only in our lifestyle, but in terms of our opinion. I mean, we have to be moderate enough. We have to be, balanced between the two extreme. So, with regards to this issue of ecology, we can, talk this kind of moderation or wasatiyah or moderate lifestyle in terms of how you consume. So you have to consume wisely, and of course, especially in terms of moderation, it also was awarded by God as a stage of Ibadur Rahman. I mean, there's one stage when you are moderate, not too stingy, but not too excessive in terms of consuming. And secondly, we have to refer back to the objective of what we are doing, especially in terms of action, our daily life. In Quran, even in Islam, Allah always emphasize on the objective of our daily life. The purpose of our life is to conserve the environment, to conserve this world. We have the concept of vicegerency, the Khalifah. So if we are full aware about our objective of the existence of this world, to preserve the world, it is a trust by God. So at least we will be more sensitive before doing something that can harm the environment. And thirdly, about the concept of sharing. Of course, in Islam, we are talk about sharing the resources. So this kind of resources, produced by our Mother Earth, it is not just for me or for one particular generation, but also for the next future generation. So of course, like what was it by Venerable, people know what these things, but sometimes we tend to forget. So what we should do is we keep reminding each other about, especially about these three things: moderate lifestyle, the objective of our daily life, the purpose of life, and also about the sharing our natural resources. Thank you for asking a question.
Right. Thank you, Brother Faisal, for the three wonderful points. May I invite Dr. Karma to share as well?
Thank you so much, Brother Wilson, and thank you, Brother Muhammad Faisal, for your sharing. I'm very impressed by the Wasatiyah concept here. And in Buddhism, we also have a similar concept of the middle path, meaning that we should not do anything in extremes, meaning that, okay, we have a looming crisis now, right? So if we were to be miserable and morose, that is one extreme, yeah, and then not do anything. And then we just be in despair. That's one extreme. And another extreme is to go out there and challenge the authorities and be angry. That's another extreme. So being in the middle, meaning that we are actually quite calm, quite composed, and we are actually governed by whatever that we see in our own minds. First and foremost, we have to know what is going on in our own minds. Once we look at the whatever thoughts that are arising, moment to moment thoughts that are arising in our own minds, we will come to a realization that the mind is actually conflicted, and this is the reason why everything else follows. And and whatever that we see outside the earth, the nature that is devastated, is also is a manifestation of conflicted mind in action. So if we do not want our external environment to be in ruin, we should first take care of our internal environment, which is our own minds. We should first start to see where the patterns, the negative patterns lie, uproot them by applying very concepts like loving kindness. So have patience, have love for others and oneself, and also have compassion for oneself and others. Treat others the way we want to be treated. And then we will realize that even Mother Earth wants that too. We should treat her the way we want to be treated. If we do not want to be trampled upon, if we do not want our limbs to be severed, then also we should not do that. We should not do that to Mother Earth as well. And the second concept is interrelatedness. We are all interrelated in this larger web of life. It's just that we cannot see those webs. It's like we can see cobwebs in our house, but we cannot see these intricate webs. We cannot see. And the reason why we cannot see is because we are obscured by our own ignorance. Our own ignorance meaning our own greed. Something that ignorance is that we do not realize that we are actually blindly acting dictated by our unruly minds. So the day we start to sit back and look at our unruly minds and say that, hey, our minds have done a lot of damage inside our own minds, inside our own bodies, and we go outside also harming others and destroying the planet. So first and foremost, let's sort ourselves out through non-judgmental awareness. So there's no point in saying that, oh, I'm useless, or we cannot do anything. Let's not judge ourselves, and let's not judge others and say, oh no, others are not doing enough, they should be doing more, or I'm not doing enough. All these things are just going to create more negativity. Why not we change our minds and say that let us do the best we can. Let us all together work as brothers and sisters, and let us not go into despair, and let us not blame one another, and let us just continue the good works that have already been started by everybody else. And let's be a drop in the ocean. That's it. Very simple.
Thank you, Dr. Karma. Perhaps we just have one last question from the participant because I see a raised hand. So Dr. Muhammad, can you kindly unmute and ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wilson, and appreciation to our both speakers. So your speeches are much appreciated, and I very much appreciate the last comment of both of you, most particularly on Wasatiyah concept and the other the similar concept in Buddhism that we have. Perhaps if I have heard that earlier, I wouldn't have raised my hand. Yeah, however, it's just a very quick comment. Comment number one on the, I'm going to talk from an Islamic perspective and a personal perspective, that certain things are created and made for us for our purpose of enjoyment. And using those things judiciously and righteously will not cause any negative impacts on ourselves and on the environment, ecologically or otherwise. This is, we have in Islam the basics of Kul Manhara. I think our brother, doctor from ABIM will enlighten further. Kul Manhara Mazinatallahi Ladhi Akhrajal Li'ibadihi Al-Muminin, or something like that. So say, ask them who has prohibited unto people those things that God has allowed and permitted for them. So consuming meat or not going vegetarian by people, I think it will not cause further ecological imbalances, because that is the natural rights of human being or of humanity. Having said that, going too much on that is also will lead us to haram, the prohibition, consuming too much deforestation, too much of hunting, and so on and so much and so on. So will cause a lot. And comment number two here is if we, most especially on the African part, the reason why we have most of this drought and a lot of disasters that we have in there is majorly based on the too much of mining system that are engaged on by the mostly Western powers. So in Ghana, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, a lot of it. So you have foreign powers coming to dig gold, the mineral resources, without replacing anything, without caring for the people or for what happens next. I think perhaps it is time, if we want to, if we wish to really be serious in stopping these ecological disturbances, perhaps we need to talk to the foreign powers to stop this too much of mining, deforestation, disturbing our environment. Perhaps if we do that, we will find a very long-lasting solution to that. So those are just two comments I think I have. So thank you all and for your time. Thank you for your insightfulness. I appreciate it, and I've been here since yesterday. I've enjoyed this discussion so much. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Dr. Muhammad. We have come to the end of this morning session number 5 on the topic of the role of civil societies in sustaining the Earth's ecological health. And I'd like to thank Brother Faisal and Dr. Karma for your wonderful and personal conviction through your many projects, testimonies, examples, and sharing with many of us, and indeed lead by examples. So thank you once again, and also thank you to the organizers and all the participants for sharing, asking questions, and rejoicing in this wonderful session. Have a good afternoon. Thank you. I pass it back now to the MC, Brother Chong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson Ang, and also our speakers, Mr. Muhammad Faisal Abdul Aziz and Venerable Dr. Tashi Choedron, for such a motivating session and a call to action to each of us to play a greater role in sustaining planet Earth. Our next session will be the keynote closing speech with the title, An Integrative View of Religion, Science, and the Earth's Ecology, an Islamic Perspective, which will be held at 4 p.m. Malaysia time, as we will now be taking a long lunch break and even tea break if you like. The session keynote speaker will be Dr. Reza Shah Kazemi, who is based in London. So 4 p.m. Malaysia time is equivalent to 8 a.m. London time, which is the suitable timing for Dr. Reza. The moderator of the session is Mr. Benny Liao. You may stay logged on to this meeting or rejoin later using the same meeting link, and hope to see you all then when my co-MC, Brother Adli Zakwan, will take over for the afternoon session. Thank you all for your participation this morning, and remember to join us for the keynote closing speech at 4 p.m. Malaysia time. See you all, and thank you very much.
Thank you.